Welcome to the continuation of the Forsyth County Board of Commissioners. We're closing in on a $503 million budget for the county. And having said that, I'll turn it over to Dudley Watts, who has been working feverishly with the staff of Forsyth County to get it all put together in time for this meeting.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon. So if I could get Kyle to come up, and we'll put on the Elmo the options as we heard them before we left for a break. And so, these are draft, and if we did not accurately articulate what you wanted, then make sure and let us know. We do have an option A and an option B, and since some folks held their cards close to their chest, we didn't try to put names by them, and knowing that anything can happen. So I'll just turn it over to Kyle to kind of review where we are and what the two proposals as we have right now look like.
Thanks, Dudley. So what you see right now is the option A, and you saw a lot of this yesterday as far as what's on the top. And so you have the adjustments that were made post presentation to deal with the increased revenues and expenditures for the additional grant money for NC Co-op, as well as the adjustment to the debt leveling rate based on our anticipated bond sale, and then the adjustment to the budget reserve to get to balance. And then in the second section, you have the recommended alternate service level adjustments that Dudley had talked about yesterday, as far as in emergency services, the neighborhood equity atlas and public health, the first floor build out in DSS, 3 additional campus security officers for Forsyth Tech, the Triad Park Greenway, marketing and recruitment for HR, and then the contract for legislative services, the citizen survey, and the internship in the manager's office. And so you can see the cost of those alternate service levels was basically $2.6 million. There was some associated revenue with those, and so that reduces the budget, the fund balance that we had to budget there. And then this is option A, and so option A would reduce the tax rate by 1.6 cents, which is essentially $6.7 million, and gets you to a total budget of $495,507,816, and sets the tax rate at 67.18 cents. And then we've got a note here that we would set the Rural Hall Suburban Fire Tax District rate at 10.5 cents rather than the 10-cent recommendation that was included in the recommended budget based on what we heard at the detailed presentation and the additional information that we received from the town. And so that's option A. I can go through option B, or do you want to talk about this one first? Or
Unless there's any comments or questions, yeah.
Any comments on option A? You can go right straight to option B.
And so option B, really, it's very similar to option A as far as the adjustments, and then the manager's recommended alternate service levels. And so what you have after that is you have some alternate service levels being approved. And so there's $100,000 for the sheriff to partially fund the Real-Time Intelligence Center alternate service level request. $60,216 for the men's health coordinator and public health, $200,000 for senior services capital campaign, $10,000 increase for Shepherd Center, and then an additional $5,000 increase for senior services. There's an increase of $16,000 to Center for Creative Economy, and $70,000 for the Arts Council. That's an increase of $70,000 for Arts Council, an increase of $60,200 for Neighbors for Better Neighborhoods, $100,000 for the Conservation Fund, and $90,000 for the Winston-Salem Theater Alliance. And then this would reduce the tax rate by 1 cent, and then reduce the budget reserve a corresponding amount. And so you get to a total budget of $498,044,451, And this sets the tax rate at 67.78 cents. So that's option B. And then what we've done as part of option B as well is on the second page, this option B would also set the Rural Hall Fire Tax District rate at 10.5, just like option A. And then we've added some policy statements here.
You want me to go through those, Kyle? Sure. Yeah, I sort of took the policy statement side of this and let Kyle handle the numbers. So what we tried to do is we heard some things in the option that that we felt like needed to be articulated, and so the first one, and I'll just read it, is if you adopted the budget with the policy statement, you would say this budget is adopted with the expectation that the schools will have additional funding available in early FY22 based on the provision adopted in December of 2020 to reconcile and I called it regular, which is really the non-Article 46 sales taxes. As of the adoption of this budget, the estimated amount is approximately $3 million. For the purposes of preparing the FY23 budget, the amount reconciled is to be considered recurring. And so you're essentially saying that when we get to the FY23 budget, the base budget in the manager's recommended budget would be that amount. And so that's the first one. The second one and the third one actually both relate to the other sort of big element of this budget, which was the American Recovery Act funds. And so the policy statement says Forsyth County has an historic opportunity to make transformational strides in this community for all of our citizens through the American Recovery Act funding. In early FY22, meaning July or August, the board will undertake a process for accepting proposals for this funding. Some organizations requested these funds through the regular budget process despite the limited Treasury guidance. The following proposals are formally carried over into the ARP process. And what we heard from the folks that that sort of developed this is that they wanted to, we had made sort of a predetermination that they might be eligible. We wanted to go ahead and list those and communicate those to those organizations. And essentially what that policy matter means is they could provide another proposal or additional information in that secondary process, but we're essentially saying that we're carrying over those proposals into that process. And then the final one was Commissioner Elamine, as we tried to articulate kind of his wishes in that, and then the sponsors of this option agreed to it. It's just essentially a statement. I don't think it binds the board in any way necessarily. It basically says the American Recovery Plan guidance expands the eligibility for programs and projects serving citizens in qualified census tracts. That's just part of the regulations that were made. The Board of County Commissioners hereby encourages applicants to focus on the QCTs with the hope that 80% of the funds available in the process would reach our most marginalized population. And the 80% of the funds available in the process really relates to that $55 million that's sort of net of what we've included through the budget process. And so anyway, those are the three kind of policy matters that if that is, as we prepare an ordinance, we would actually put those policy statements in the ordinance. And that's it. And the only other one we had, Mr. Chairman, is since you articulated the pickleball option, we actually do have an option C, which is basically the manager's recommended budget plus $40,000 for pickleball. I don't know that we necessarily need to go through that one, but I think we have two options really on the table. And if you wanted to throw, we can find some pickleball money if we need to. We got some work.
I'd be willing to bet you money after all this 100,000 here, $1 million here, that's the one that'll get all the attention for some reason.
Right. Well, I think we ought to study pickleball as an option, where it could go and what we could do. And that's a study thing for this year.
Who would be giving the $40,000 to?
Us.
No.
Well, we're going to run it, unless you plan to do it, Commissioner.
The 40,000 number that we actually were able to develop really allows us to build a couple courts. So.
Yeah, that's it.
So it goes to our department.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, cool. But it's nowhere in any option unless you want to pull pickleball
I can
into
see the headline in the Winston-Salem Journal, Forsyth to become headquarters for pickleball. You don't think so? Oh, my. What do you think there, Wesley?
ask a question on number 1? Is that just for next year's budget? That's not ongoing, is it? Just to assume the 3 million just for next year's budget, budget 23. It's not every year, is it?
The way, my assumption when I wrote that was that would be added to the base, and that's where we would start next year's continuation budget from.
But just for next year, not,
No, there wouldn't be necessarily an additional 3 million the next year. It would just add it to the base, but it would answer the question, what's our base budget starting point next year?
okay, and I'm confused. I've gone to as many of these Zoom meetings as I can possibly go on this American Recovery Plan. I don't understand this qualified census tract. Is that part of the Treasury? The Treasury has designated this?
Yes, it's actually the American Rescue Plan Act. It is defined in there. It uses those. Those are actually have been used by HUD, and they've been defined by HUD, and so it does allow, as it says here, more uses, particularly around housing and childcare and education in the QCTs.
So I'm to assume that just this map that we've seen will get 80%. What's that say for the rest of Forsyth County? We don't have any people in Forsyth County that need this money? I don't know. I'm confused. I thought that our portion of the money, this almost 75 million, was for Forsyth County. I did not realize it was just for a certain map.
That's certainly the board's choice. It is not required to be 80%.
It's not required. Is
No.
that what you just said?
That's correct. It's not required.
Well, then I'm not in favor, because I think there's need throughout Forsyth County. And I think many people have been hurt by this epidemic. And if we were to go with 80%, then that would mean that the city's portion of the money and the county's portion of the money basically is going to one area. And that does not, I represent all of Forsyth County, and I cannot leave them out. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think what the statement said is more as a hope to, as a guidance, and I'm still thinking what that leaves, it still leaves 10 million. We got 55 million, and basically you're looking at 20% of that, or 11 million, that's available for anywhere, and it would be, since there's more flexibility in the census tracts, which are also in Forsyth County, we could do more there. I think it's just going to have a lot more flexibility there in spending the money. And I think that's the issue. But like I said yesterday, if there was some unbelievably great idea that came up, we ought to be able to consider it. And I think that could supersede this if there was one that was a different thing, because it's not a firm, it's more like a guideline, and to say we ought to be focusing on the people who got hurt the most during the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what it's saying.
And I don't think that 80% are the ones that got hurt most. I think there are people all throughout Forsyth County who were hurt in all different ways. I think you've got small business in Forsyth County. I think you have these restaurants throughout Forsyth County. I just don't want to plant the idea to people that 80% of our money is going to go to a certain area. I want everybody to feel free to bring in ideas, and if we put the notion out there that 80% of it's going to a certain place, they're not going to bring an idea in.
Just food for thought, just doing a little arithmetic. We would have $11 million available for rural haul water systems and other projects like that. I think that would be a nice generous offer on our part. So I don't really see a problem with 80% as a guide. Not a mandate, but just as a guide. And I'd be willing to vote for the water system in Rural Hall. It's 1.8 million. Let's put that down here. Just as an example.
Yeah. Well, when we get ready to vote, I will be voting no, and I know what happens with guidelines. I've been a part of guidelines for a long time.
Now what?
On option B, and actually it was sort of an in-between, there's one blue, we have our blue line items that is that in that list that is not on there, that I think is worth considering is the Industries for the Blind request on their project, which is clearly another organization that has been heavily hit by the pandemic and an opportunity for a new endeavor for them, which is broader economic development for a nonprofit organization that serves many of our most vulnerable also folks in terms of work. So maybe it could be included. The IFB proposal would be on that list of ones that would not have to reapply for consideration in ARP.
Was there not an announcement in the paper this week that they got a huge hit from federal money
I did not see that.
for the blind? Did they not get
Most of their
federal
money comes from the federal government.
I know. Did they not get a big hit this week?
I don't think so. They got some money, but they didn't get, what's your definition of a big hit?
Don't know. I think we should know.
I think there was an article. I don't remember. I didn't read it. I didn't have an opportunity to read it, but I think I do remember seeing something. We can look into that.
That's just what I want to get a part of, that we are not, that we're not giving funds, everybody's giving funds to the same place. I just want us to be able to touch as many people as possible and not overlap the funds.
And I think you've got your hearts in the right place, but Industry for the Blind serves 1,000 people who can't see or
I understand.
have low vision in this
Industry for the Blind.
community.
My mother participated
And talk about
in that.
hard hit. If you can't see, you can't drive, a lot of things. You can tear that down any way you want, but
Yeah.
the bottom line is, all organizations have a mighty good reason for existing. Goodwill Industries for the Blind.
I understand.
that
My
type of
mother was a
thing.
part of it.
Kyle, what
We
you
don't want
got?
duplication of funding. I
Okay.
want the funding to touch as many folks as
We all
possible.
do. Yeah, that's true.
Well, I guess this issue on the list in Part B is not a guarantee. It's just that they would be on the list to be considered. And I think if what you're mentioning suggests if there's some fraudulent problem, then that we don't need to be contributing further on that. But this is only saying there would be considered on the list. It's not saying they're going to be on our. They're not going to say they're going to be the ones included. I think that's the issue. Is to avoid. I know the people who applied for alternative service levels. I'll give you the example I gave yesterday. Crosby Scholars applied license. They're not thinking American Rescue Plan, and this is a way that we think they're eligible. 3 people did that looked at it, so they can be included there. And I just don't think they should have to apply again to be considered. That's all that's doing is they don't have to apply again to be considered in our deliberations for American Rescue Plan.
Now, Kyle,
Yes, sir.
what else have you got?
Those were the 2 options that we had to discuss, and we're happy to answer questions. And
Yep.
I move that we take a recess for about 30 minutes so we can get pickleball added.
Now, that's one you can really argue about. Well, does anybody want to take a recess for a few minutes? You do?
Make it 15, huh?
15,
I was going to
Commissioner,
suggest we might be able to accomplish what you're getting at in 15 minutes.
Commissioner Linville?
Yeah, we got 30 minutes.
Well, I won't need any time, but if the others need time, I'm
I
willing
think
to
we
go
got
along
about
with
4
it.
at one time. So let's just go ahead and take 15 minutes. We'll be back. We, at Forsyth County's beautiful Commissioners' Meeting Room on Chestnut Street at Government Center, have completed a slight recess, and now we're back in business. And it is time to make some decisions. And is there anything you'd like to add, Mr. County Manager, before we continue?
Mr. Chairman, just make sure that we're looking, we are going to leave this room and we're going to go prepare two budget ordinances, one for option A and one for option B, and it will include the provisions that are outlined in each one of these. And so, going into tomorrow's meeting, we'll have two options for the board to consider, and we'll have the documents needed to actually vote on either one of them. And if I guess the main thing we need to do today is make sure there's not a third option out there, or anything else we should be considering in that.
Okay.
Could
Yes,
I
ma'am.
request that we vote separately on the policy statements rather than adding them to a budget?
You mean on option B?
Yeah.
You want to split option B into multiple.
That'd be all right.
Yeah, no problem. This is a democracy.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So since there are three policy statements, do you want to vote separately on each policy statement?
No.
Or no? Okay. All right. Very good.
Chairman,
Yes, sir.
with that in mind, I'd like to move that we adjourn this meeting and reconvene tomorrow at 2:00.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn, returning here at 2 o'clock for a meeting to accept one of the options we have and finalize the budget.
And we do have a briefing following the formal meeting, so we will introduce new items for the June 24th meeting.
All right, and we have a remote meeting tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, is that correct?
There is not a meeting of the Board of County Commissioners in the morning, it's just something separate on your calendar.
All right, all right. Any discussion? If not, all in favor of Commissioner Kaplan's motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
It's been lovely being with you.